Try this challenge if you would. When you get up in the morning and start your routine, count how many brands you interact with. Let me try and paint a bit of a picture for you. Let's assume you live in the United States of America. What's the first thing you look at in the morning? Likely it's your Apple or Android phone. Maybe you roll out of your Crate and Barrel sheets and head to the shower with your Unilever products. Afterwards, you don a Banana Republic shirt and Lucky Brand jeans while scrolling through your Facebook or Instagram feed, brushing your teeth with Crest toothpaste. And that's only the first 20 minutes of the day. Digital marketing experts estimate that most Americans are exposed to about 4,000 to 10,000 ads daily. At some point, we start a screening process for what we engage with and ignore brands and advertising messages unless it interests us. So of the brands that you have interacted with today, which ones did the best job of marketing to your needs or interests? Do they have a clear message? How do they connect with you? Now, these are serious challenges that brands need to overcome, but perhaps in your brand's challenges, there are great opportunities for refinement of the brand or advertising efforts, which can ultimately lead to obtaining more market share in your space. Our guest is an expert in making brands known for all the right reasons and probably has some very enlightening answers to these challenges. We'll get to that in a bit. Hello and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success podcast brought to you by Sproutwith.com. I'm Vinay Koshy, and our guest today is Eric Holtzclaw. Now, Eric, you known as something of a visionary and an idea guy. In fact, you are the chief strategist and dojo master at Liger, where you're the resident expert in guiding businesses to find their identities and core values, craft visions, and establish their brands. You're a serial entrepreneur, host of the call, and are also the author of the book Laddering, Unlocking the Potential of Consumer Behavior. Now, you've been at this for quite a while, Eric, so I'm curious, was there a genesis moment, if you will, in starting Liger? And has the rationale or the problem that you were trying to solve at the beginning, is it still the same or has it changed somewhat in the intervening years?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I accidentally started her. So it was not an intentional company start. My background, I'm a recovering technologist. So I ran development shops very early in my career, working primarily with Fortune 500 and Global 2000 companies to take products to the internet when they wanted to try it out and see if it would work. And then I owned a research company for a period of time. And we did about 250 to 300 projects with companies trying to figure out why a product wouldn't launch, what they need to do with it, those types of things. So I got to see a lot of work and not work. And I sold that business in 2012 and planned to ride out the rest of my career as an operations guy to crazy CEOs who are trying to start businesses. And so I was working as a right-hand guy for a bunch of businesses doing their operational work. And then they would hand me their marketing department. They're like, hey, so while you're here doing the operations, would you also take care of marketing? And so I ended up cleaning up their operations. They didn't need me on that side anymore, but I had 5 or 6 companies that I was running marketing for. And I have someone who's worked for me for a while. And she said, hey, you have 5 or 6 jobs. Maybe this is a company and not just consultancy. And so I merged my business with another business, which is how we formed Liger, because my business was mostly strategy. I made it execution. And so Liger means a lion and a tiger combined. It's also called Napoleon Dynamite. So we're loosely based on that movie as well. And we focus primarily in the B2B space. About 90% of our portfolio are B2B companies. We do a lot with insurance, financial services, manufacturing, SaaS, boring spaces. But yeah, it's a combination. If you think about it, technology and understanding the customer, marketing is a lot about that nowadays. It's a lot of technology. It's a lot about understanding the customer. And then, of course, I've seen things that worked and didn't work. So they didn't do it on purpose. And I stumbled into it, but it's a good fit for where the world is today. And I understand the disruption in a way that I think a traditional technologist or a traditional marketer might not. So that's been kind of part of what I think is my advantage.
I'm curious, there's obviously a whole bunch of branding and marketing agencies. What is unique about Liger that makes it what it is today?
So number one, we don't call ourselves an agency. So we call ourselves a marketing firm. So it's a difference. As an agency wants to receive a creative brief and then they want to come back and tell you how they would execute against it. They may be very tactic oriented or they may only do strategy. We as Liger we come into a company almost more like an accounting firm or a law firm. We have areas of specialty. So people who know different parts of the marketing stack and what they need to do inside those. But we always start with business first. So we'll do a brand therapy session with a company to understand what is their business and what are they trying to
Hmm.
accomplish. And then we build the marketing tactics around it. And then we're there to deliver those tactics as well. So we don't come in and say, hey, here's the strategy. Good luck executing it. Or we do this one good
Hmm.
tactic. So that's what you should do. We're prescribing the right types of things based on the company's needs or what they want to accomplish. We do live primarily in, so it's funny because we talk about B2B versus B2C. And I have a slightly different opinion of that. B2C is transactional sales typically. So I'm trying to sell you a soda. Yeah, if I run the right kind of ads with the right kind of discount, I can do that. B2B is relational, which means that I need to educate the customer over time. And they're probably making a very serious decision. If I decide to install a new technology in my company, I could get fired. It could be my boss maybe doesn't give me the promotion. I'm making this very serious decision. That can happen in the consumer world too, because we'll work with companies that are launching like a new medical procedure that may not be the one
Hmm.
that's traditionally followed. And so we have to do a lot of education about why would you do this versus what your doctor has told you. We look at hard problems. We like messy companies that may have acquired other companies and they're trying to figure out how to get their technology stack to work and what should be the brand.
Hmm.
I would say Liger tends to take on problems and companies other agencies wouldn't. They wouldn't
Right.
do those things. So it makes the work more interesting for us because we don't end and begin so solidly, but it also
Hmm.
for our team sometimes they're like we're always doing the same thing in the same way, but not always the same thing.
And I'm curious, given your journey to date, what would you say is your personal area of strength?
So my personal area of strength is I'm interestingly able to sit both either a strategy or an implementation seat. So I've either been we
Hmm.
follow a thing called EOS, which has a visionary and an integrator. And so I can either be the visionary or I can be the integrator. And not a lot of people can look at it from both sides. So at times in my career, I've been the one integrating the visionary's idea, and at times I'm the visionary. So that is one part of it. So it does give me this ability to understand what the balance is on. If I think about my kind of creative chops within the organization, I'm a writer. I love writing. If I
Right.
could go back and make enough money at it, I probably would have been a journalist or maybe a therapist. I love to find out like why people do what they do, getting behind the scenes of the story. Because people like
Mhm.
on the surface or companies on the surface will tell you they're doing something that is really not true. Like, how do you dig underneath that and understand it? So naturally curious, unemployable. Like I'm terribly unemployable. No company will hire me, but they like it because I'll come in and tell a company exactly what I think, why something's working or not working, and I'm very sure of myself because I've seen so many things.
Mm.
Confident areas. Yeah, I don't do great with monotony and day, and I'm terrible with politics. Those kind of things. Yeah.
So in that area of strength, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
I think the businesses assume marketing is so marketing used to be like this one little department at the front that was a transactional piece. Hey, so marketing is responsible for pushing people to the door, whatever the door was, my website, my store, my phone number, whatever. And then sales picks it up and does the relationship. And in 2008, that was dramatically changed. So we had three disruptive technologies that got introduced. And because of those technologies, marketing now is the relationship and goes from the very beginning when the client or customer first shows up till they probably have their last interaction with you. And sales is more transactional. And so people try to put marketing in a box and they think it's like a very finite set, but it's so much more broadly across the organization and so much more important to get it right nowadays. And it's discounted. Marketing as a group in an organization, we're the ones
Yep.
who like have the shiny ideas and whatever, very Don Draper men kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I think that's the disservice that the marketing group sees today.
Right. Yeah, I would imagine in some circles there is something of a mind shift that needs to occur, especially in the B2B space. I'm curious, Could you spell out some of these challenges to be more specific and how you help them navigate that journey?
Yes, organizations are typically being run in one of three ways. They're product led. So they have a bunch of
Mhm.
products and features that they want to push out, and the product team is the end all be all, and marketing and sales follows behind. They're marketing led. Marketing leads the charge, and everybody else, or they're sales led. What happens in sales and product led organizations is marketing typically gets pushed down, and they get pushed down in a way that's not, because marketing should be the overarching umbrella and should be thinking about everything across. So I see a lot of mistakes made by product or sales led organizations. I also see organizations in which marketing doesn't have a seat at the leadership table.
Hmm.
Marketing doesn't even have representation properly. So a product or sales led organization may have marketing. They've got a VP of marketing, but they don't have a CMO. And so there's not a strong voice sitting at the leadership level who's playing the part of what marketing's role is, which is to advocate for the customer and the brand and those kind of things. And so those mistakes are repeated over and over again because they're classically based on older models. And so
Well,
us older guys, I'm an older guy, need to like realize that marketing isn't what we might have thought it was when we were taught in school, and to think about it in a very different fashion. I feel like sometimes I'm a prophet, right? I'm going into companies and talking to them about marketing and why it's this important thing. And I get these people who don't always agree with me, but I've been doing this long enough. I've seen it work and I've seen it not work. I know that what we do work. We follow a very simple model that assists us with explaining that. And it's not a Liger term. I wish it were. It's not like it's not whatever, but we call it BATCOM, BATCOM, BATCOM. And so BATCOM, it's branding, awareness, traffic, conversion, optimization, and maintenance. Everyone in the world wants conversion. I want conversion. So if I have a phone call with somebody, the first thing I want them to do is buy. That's not how it works, right?
yep.
So if I want conversion, to back up on the backcom and find out how much traffic am I getting? Am I getting traffic that's going to convert? Because if I'm not getting traffic, well, are they even aware that I exist? And so awareness is my next component. And then my very first letter is branding. And if my branding is bad or inconsistent or it doesn't stand out, I have to start at B to get to C. And so many companies are so focused on C. They're doing lead gen, pumping out that email or posting that one thing on social media. And they're like, but we didn't make any sales. And I'm like, but that's not how it works. And you made an important point at the very beginning. The world is so busy and there's so many messages. In the B2B world, we know that it takes about 21 times for someone from branding to awareness, and then 5 to 7 more to get them from traffic to conversion. So we're looking at across the BTC of that, we're looking at that 26 to 27 touch points to really get
Mm.
someone to. And those things are not typically happening within the ecosystem I own. It may be reviews, content that you've put in other places. And everyone's mana is to end up on optimization and maintenance. If I am converting, then what I want to do is do that as effectively and efficiently as possible. So I'm going to optimize things and then maintain them, meaning I know if I turn on this one lead magnet or do this one series, that I am going to get predictable conversion that I'm getting for less and less dollars. So it's not an easy thing. This is not going to the gym one time and trying the machine and being like, but I don't look any different. No, it can
Mhm.
take months to put this together and make it work correctly. There are ways you can use paid to effectively support organic, and you can't lean too heavily into organic. So it's complicated. It's so
Mm.
complicated. And I really wish it were simpler. And I really wish it were more, we as Americans, we like things to be fast and easy and whatever. And we liken it to financials or something. Every month I run a balance sheet and I run a P&L. Marketing is changing. And so you're having to figure out how to maneuver within that environment to get people to where they need to be. So that's that's the thing I talk about all the time. And the older the person is, the more not really dealt with modern marketing, the more they're just like, we need to buy leads and we need to call them and convert them. Nobody wants you to call them. It wants to
Mm.
be sold to, they want to buy. So how do I build an ecosystem that allows you to buy?
Brilliant. I know you mentioned that you've been in organizations where sometimes marketing doesn't have a seat at the leadership table. I'm also curious, even if you find that marketing does have a seat at the table, do you often find that branding actually has a voice at that table?
It depends on what the marketer or how tactical or strategic the marketer is. And
Hmm.
honestly, marketers typically lean too far one way or the other. So they're qualitative and quantitative people. And so a quantitative person is going to care less about the brand. The
Yeah.
qualitative person care way too much about the brand. He's, but our
Mhm.
voice would say that and we would not do that, whatever. Yeah, but if it'll convert, maybe your voice would do that. And so that marketing leader and knowing which way they lean, I lean heavily qualitative. I'm all about how it feels and what it sounds like and looks like and those kind of things. And I have to balance myself to someone who's, yeah, but the thing doesn't convert. And so I
Mhm.
have to listen to that voice. Just because you like that way you're talking about it or looking at it, it's not common language. So someone's not going to be able, they're not going to search for that or whatever. There needs to be a balance and you need to be self aware. If you're sitting at that table, are you someone who's more into aesthetics and more into the delicate nature of your brand? And you can afford to do that if you're a big company. You cannot afford to
Mhm.
do that if you're a smaller company with a smaller budget. What you can afford to do is be very consistent. Don't change your brand out just because you feel like it's boring to you. And how do you then be consistent with it over time such that you're hitting those 21 times you need to build brand awareness?
Yeah. You're obviously talking about balancing aspects of marketing and in particular, perhaps the organic and the performance side of things. Could you share an example or two of how B2B companies have got to that place where they're able to strike a balance between the two?
Yeah. So we have companies who'll come to us who are spending literally no money on paid, like nothing. They
Right.
have no dollars going towards paid. And so we're doing organic. Organic takes a
Mhm.
long time. It's harder to test things when you're just doing organic, but it's very possible. So if
Mhm.
you want to ride the long train with us, get on the organic train. Now we'll get to a point where we have gotten to the outer ring of what we can do organically. And then we need to add a paid component, and the paid component can help us accelerate that organic. So geofencing a trade show, for example, and picking up some new leads that you didn't have before, or doing some kind of an activation that is including some of that stuff that you have to pay for. Starting to pay gets you better or result. We will also have companies who come to us that all they're doing is paying for traffic. Like they're buying everything. And so when you buy everything, if you turn it off, everything stops
Yeah.
working more organic. And so it is a balance. I think marketing is like being a financial advisor. So you're looking at the company's portfolio and some of the content and things like that are your bot components. And then the paid and some of those pieces are like your high risk stocks. You're watching those more closely and you're moving the portfolio around. And what do we do now? And is this working or that working? And because we both know that the people who own some of the more important properties do marketing to change the rules on a pretty regular
Mhm.
basis, now you got to rethink it. And it's like, oh my gosh, now one of the search engines is doing this thing. We need to make sure that we're servicing it that way. And if we don't, then we're not going to be playing the game the way that we were. It is set it and forget it. And that companies will run into complacency. I've met companies that completely lived off some kind of a paid approach, and then the rules changed, and then the business couldn't even survive because they hadn't established enough organic, or their growth is stunted by the fact that they've only lived in organic land.
So, other than explaining the journey, so to speak, and how they could leverage things further, are there specific frameworks or principles that you would advise some of your clients to use and have profited from to ensure there's a balance between the two?
Yeah, so we talk about backcom, but then we also talk about how you build a good marketing
Mhm.
ecosystem. And so the very middle of it is going to be your website or digital property or whatever it is you're driving people to. And that needs to be your best brochure. But a lot of people focus on building that and then they don't do all the other right things. If I launch that great website and I've spent a year building it and perfection, the way of progress, Google loves it for a minute and then forgets it exists. And
Mhm.
so build that middle component, we need to start surrounding it immediately with content. And that content needs to be educational content, thinking about your company as if it were a magazine. And how can you
Mhm.
write about stories? Again, back to me wanting to be a journalist. This is the perfect job, right? What are the stories your company's telling me? And then I can build a pillar of content that starts to make organic work. I put some paid behind it. And then my next ring is going to be either SEO or social media. And how do I know
Mm,
if it's SEO or social media? SEO is people search for it. So it's a term or a thing that people are familiar with. So I want to play the SEO game more heavily. Social media is it's new and I may have to interrupt because they've never heard of me or the idea or the concept. And social media is a better way to build awareness. So middle ring is your website, next ring content, next ring is shared SEO and social media, and your balance is going to depend on how and what people know. So once I have that working, I get that working first. So that's like you go to the gym and you try to lift 500 pounds the first day, you're going to screw up. Let's get
mm,
ourselves down. Then we start to add things like landing pages with drip campaigns behind them against content we know has a very specific need. We start to place content on other sites so that we're building a spider web and getting our site authority up. So there is a subscribed way and prescribed way to build the whole thing. Building a house, you have to build the foundation first and then add all the
mhm,
other things. Because if you do any of those other pieces first, you won't get as great result. So I could go spend a bunch of money on paid and I have really bad content and my website doesn't work and I'm just wasting it. So I'm driving a
mhm,
lot of traffic, but I'm not getting anybody to move along my funnel. Or I could build the most beautiful website in the world and not do anything for people to notice that it exists, and I don't get any traffic to it. It's like a billboard in the desert, right?
mhm.
Nobody buy it. So that's how we start to assess getting ecosystem. Like, what does it look like? How does it work? And how deep can we go into what's actually bringing people along the funnel the way that we want them to for conversion?
Is there an example of a company in the B2B space that you feel is doing this particularly well?
Yes. So it's a case study on our website. So we have a client called GenCap, and GenCap is the fourth largest wholesale brokerage company in the United States. And they are a M&A. So we help them go
Mm,
from 19 different brands to one
right.
and merged everything into one big marketing ecosystem.
Mhm,
Their results for us from an organic and are amazing. They get triple digit growth year over year in the way that we're building that. And we've started to add display and paid to theirs, and we've been able to juice it and really test for things. So they have, and they have followed what we have prescribed to them almost to a T. We're like,
mm,
this is what we'll do next. And they're like, great. And showing the results, like the reports, all that stuff had been amazing because they trusted us to be experts. I'm not an
mm,
expert at insurance. It's not my thing, right?
yep.
Don't do medical because I can't stand the sight of blood. But if I go to the doctor tells me I need to have a surgery, I need to do a thing, I should go do what the doctor tells me to do. The problem in this is everybody thinks they're marketers. Everybody thinks it's so simple. Oh, it's just some pictures and a word, and it is so much more complicated. And so you need to trust and lean into the experts that you're working with in order to get the results that you want. And please don't come to me 30 days before you're launching something because I need more time than that
Mm,
to really make sure you're going to be successful. They're a great example. We've got several other kind of case studies on the website that are similar. But it's B2B companies who subscribe to our religion and we know the religion works. And it's just like
mm,
we all this process, we follow this thing, we keep up with what's current and add that in. But there's certain kind of block and tackle that will make sense, at least for the time being, until we have another disruption in technology. And then we may have to think about it again.
mm. Like, but, you mentioned German Tap, and I was wondering if you could dive a bit deeper into what you did with them, because I would imagine there are particular strategies that you employ to help clients like them in the situation of trying to merge 19 different brands together, as well as a culture, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Yes. Yeah, so we do at the beginning of every single session with every client, we do what we call a brand therapy session.
Mhm,
It's business first, marketing second. Let's talk about the business, what's right for the business. So that's how we defined how their pillars of or their silos of businesses would be established and where the brand would go. And then we made sure not to lose any site authority from the previous brand so that we picked up any traffic and things that they had and drove over the best content to the new consolidated site. So it was a very purposeful mapping between this is what the old brand looked like. This is how they're going to merge into the new brand. Now we're going to make sure we continue to take advantage of that,
mhm,
site authority and traffic because some of their companies have been around for 20 or 30 years. They had great site authority. They've been around forever. So we don't want to lose any of
Mhm.
the SDGs. But then making sure we're continuing to build thought leadership content in those categories so that we stay relevant, doing all the right things with the way that the brand shows up across consistency across all the platforms, across all the users of the brand. And it is one of the reasons that they can more easily attract a new company for acquisition because they have such a
Mhm.
strong marketing approach. That company wants to tap into the fact that they'd be part of this bigger marketing engine. It was a very purposeful decision, getting all the leaders in a room and getting them to decide they have their old brands. How do we make a new brand? Make sure that new brand works the way that it should. And then starting to collapse everything in a way that we would continue to be successful. We continue to work on back-end system integration so that we have better information on we can get people to a quote or being appointed, but we want to know, okay, what kind of business did they actually transact and when are they like to do that again so we can build the proper win back programs and things. And that is requiring consolidating 17 different systems down to one.
Yeah.
And so first step of that is establishing just a data lake that we can dump data into and use as a sort of heads up display for the marketing department to predict what we might do next with our audiences.
You certainly managed to combine 19 different brands and cultures into one. But I guess for those of us who are thinking more tangible results and numbers and things, could you share some of the more tangible outcomes that BenCap has been able to achieve through this process?
Yeah, we report on a quarterly basis up to their board, and we have seen triple digit returns on
Okay.
traffic conversion growth, which for typically you're looking at like for an established brand, 10%, right? If I could get a
Mhm.
10%, be happy. But we could just continue to blow out the numbers because of the way we've been able to consolidate all that traffic and also attract new people into that
Mhm.
ecosystem. It's one of our prouder organizations because we've just got such good results on following this very prescribed way of approaching it. And again, it's
Mhm.
because they trusted us and they've been patient. They
Mhm.
allowed us to do it the right way, which for them it becomes a flywheel. So if you do it right, it's hard to turn it off. You do it
Yep.
wrong and you turn one part of it off, all of a sudden everything goes dark. And do it right, and you're like almost can't kill it. You know, do everything right. Now it's just going to run
Yep.
halfway or not, and one part's not set up, and you start. That's where you see people lose their belief in the marketing approach, but
Mhm.
it's not the approach that's being taken. It's the fact that there were shortcuts put in place, or some part of it was not listened to the way that it should have been.
Mhm. So, if I understand this correctly, you start with the brand therapy and then you move on towards combining things and applying the BATCOM framework that you talked about earlier. I think when we were talking about BATCOM earlier, the kind of implicit understanding was that it's more of an outward focus to customers and those external stakeholders. But I would imagine with this process that you undertook with GenCap, there is an internal component as well. And I was wondering if BATCOM
Yeah,
can be applied both internally and externally, or is it a slightly different process internally speaking?
that's a great question. So part of what we're doing with brand therapy is we're understanding what they want the brand to be versus what the brand
Mhm.
actually is. And so the brands are made up of the external customer, the employees, and maybe the investors. Like that kind
Mhm.
of, so there's several people who are kind of part of this. And we've done a bunch of internal rollouts too, where we'll build a mission, vision, and value statement for them that we then roll
Mhm.
out internally or whatever. But that's a really important point you make. What happens with brand therapy is we come back to them and say, if it were our company and our money, this is how we would take this to market. And we give them a couple of choices, typically 3 to 5 choices of how to take it to market. And we are considering very heavily who they are internally because to take a brand to market that doesn't reflect internally, correct, it won't
Mhm.
work. Right. And I have been fired from clients before because we were doing a brand therapy session and they wanted to be one thing. And when I got done with the brand therapy session, I was like, well, if you want to be this thing, we have to fire everyone because that's not who your employees are. And that's not how you approach the market. And they don't often like that answer. Yeah, but we're the client. I'm like, yeah. And I'm telling you the answer. If you don't do, you're telling me you want to be this high flying brand because you got bought by this PE firm and you got to show results. But the people who work for your company work for you because they love the fact that the business is very stable and that they're whatever. They're these people don't fit what you have said you want the brand to be. So we have to make a change. We either have to choose to embrace what you are, or we have to get rid of the things that don't fit. Because
Mm.
customers, your client, any potential person working with a company, they're going to, you detect that immediately. Whenever a brand tries to do something that's not, yeah, that's not you. That's not what you do.
Mm.
So it would be unsuccessful for us to try to push forward a brand that doesn't reflect the company as it actually is or can quickly get to from an aspirational perspective.
I would imagine, at least in some companies, there would be a bit of a dissonance between who they claim to be and who they really are, internally speaking, especially from a culture point of view. How do you address that and build out a conscious awareness of who they are and perhaps who they want to be, and take that, help them take that journey?
Yeah. So the brand therapy sessions, we pride ourselves on not doing like death by PowerPoint. So it's not a PowerPoint
Mhm.
thing. They're very interactive. And there's some
Yeah.
exercises we take them through that will expose the fact that maybe they aren't today what they want to be tomorrow. And so some of those exercises, we'll either do them as we want to do them as you are, or we want to do them as you aspire. And so by looking at what that sort of looks like, how that works, we then, when we come back and say, if it were our company and our money and we aspire to do this thing, here's the activations or the go to market we would use. By the way, this also means you're signing up to make the following changes within your organization. And they either have those already in flight or they may be like, no, we're not going to do that. And that's this isn't going to work. And it is this beginning, like marketing's about choice. It's about making choice. People think it's about everything, and it really isn't. It's about narrowing. Who are you? How do you sit? What is your lens? What kind of customers are you going to attract? What kind of customers are you going to repel? And so we're forcing them in a more fun way. People love the first part of our sessions. They're like the first 30 days are great. Like we're picking colors and we're talking about words and we're looking at who they are and very kind of cathartic. And then we move into what I call the pit of despair because I'll make a choice and then we have to spend the next 60 days building everything. And they're like, what's going on? I'm like, remember all that work we did that first 30 days? We now have to implement it. And so in that period of time, they're being very retrospective. They're thinking about themselves. An ideal client for us is agreeing, hey, no, we need to restructure our site towards an audience organization instead, or we're going to have to rethink the way that we do customer care because our customer care doesn't really map to what we're going to say we are as a brand. So it is about choice and it is about pinning that team down with, are you up for what we're about to do? You told me
Mhm.
you want to be able to run a marathon. This is how we're going to run a marathon. And if you're like, I don't want to get up at 5 o'clock every morning and stop eating cake. And I'm like, well, then maybe we're not running marathon. Maybe we're going to do a fun run. And that's okay too. There's room for
Mm.
all of them, but you do need to be honest and selective because if not, you'll waste a bunch of time and frustrate everyone.
Mm. So um, I would imagine this is yeah, um, a difficult journey, both for yourself as well as for a potential company. There needs to be quite a degree of alignment and perhaps even agreeing on the principles by which you operate. Um, I'm curious, who or what has influenced you the most with the customer experience in terms of how you deliver things as a service-based company?
Yes, that's a really good question. So the reason that I started a research company is back in the 90s, I was giving away my age. So I was doing a bunch of startups and we built a product and I had a marketing person who took us into a usability lab kicking and screaming. I was like, we're 2 weeks from launch. Like, why are we taking this thing into like, why do I care what the customer thinks? I was that guy. And we got that first person in front of the system that we had built. They could do anything. Not a thing. We were trying to get them to enter their credit card. They can figure out how to enter their credit card. They can register. It was a awesome failure. Biggest failure ever. And the next person and the next person. And it taught me, it humbled me as it looked at what that is and what that meant. And I fell in love. I fell in love with it. And so then had the opportunity to start this business in 2002 in that space. And then I watched companies come in and make these gross assumptions about why things were working or not working, having never spoken to the person they were building this thing for, the intended person, and then proving to them wrong over and over again. or finding these really cool things that you had no idea. Like, oh, that's what it is. That's really what's making it. And even me going in, I'll be going in, like, yeah, this thing's going to be this, right? And then you get halfway
Mhm.
through the pitch, and you're like, it's not that at all. This is actually what we need to focus on. I have uniquely been in positions where I see it be wrong, and I'm okay with being wrong. I'm very confident. I can also be told I'm wrong and be proven that. You have to have that a level of awareness when we're working with these clients. I love Malcolm Gladwell and Tipping Point and some of the books that he wrote. I love the stuff that I've been able to do on my own in that space. There's entrepreneur Marcus Lemonis, who there's a show called Profit, and he and I
Mhm.
love him. He's great. He goes into a company and he's just, hey, so let's get behind why you continue to do this thing, because there's always something driving that choice that
Right.
you don't want to face. And so if you can have that soft, gushy conversation with people, you can really get to the good stuff. And the good stuff is what's going to establish an amazing brand and make you really successful.
I would imagine that certainly acquiring results goes a long way towards building trust. But in the interim, are there perhaps leading indicators that you use to ensure that the overall experience is what it should be? Could you
Yeah.
elaborate on that?
Yeah. So if you start to think about branding awareness, traffic, conversion, optimization, and maintenance, we want to show success along each one of those
Mhm.
ladders. We're doing different things at different points. So that's how we look at it, because I am not looking conversion at the beginning. I'm making sure the
Right.
brand is the aware. And so there are certain, so you want to get people to the site. Got people to the site. That means we've got awareness and traffic that they're not staying. So we don't have engagement. So like
Okay.
now we got to increase engagement because we're not going to kick to conversion. So
Mhm.
there are things that we're paying attention to within the reporting. We do monthly reporting with our clients, all the stuff that's happening, what's working, what's not, what we want to tweak. And you can start to see the little seedlings of, okay,
Mhm.
we're before cross, we're getting into the point. And then we know, okay, we got to work on, we're driving a bunch of traffic. No one's taking the offers. There must be something, there must be an issue with what we're offering, how we're offering it, whatever. Let's test and try that out. And it's different at different points. And that's why companies get really caught up in certain metrics that they're measuring, like that. We've always measured the number of people who came to their website or the homepage. I'm like, I don't care how many people come to your homepage. In fact, I think them showing up on your homepage is probably a failure, because that means they didn't get to the thing they were looking for. Because I want to deep dive them to something that solves their problem or educates them on you as a company. It's not all just the hooey. I like the hooey part of it. And they're like, oh, how does this make me feel and whatever. But we can also then start to see early indications of success.
Mhm.
But the problem is that companies have to have patience to move us along, right? And you can spend to get across. What I found is B2B companies are less likely to spend to increase their velocity than like a B2C company is. A B2B company typically isn't spending enough on marketing. They're spending a
Mhm.
small percentage of their revenue, and they don't really see how some of the quote unquote B2C tactics could work for them. And they would if they would trust them and try them out.
Hmm. Certainly. I would imagine that the times that we're living in, which is simply put it, uncertain, is posing a challenge to many companies, including those in the B2C and B2B space as well. I'm curious.
What's interesting about that? So I'm really old now, and so I've done this for a long time. I've never lived in, I've never lived in certain times. It's always
Right. Yeah.
like we say that like all the
Yeah.
time. Oh,
Yeah.
technology's never been more disruptive. Oh, it's never been more uncertain. And I'm like, isn't that just how it is? That's just it. That's the normal. Like, I don't know if I've had it why where it was just like things were just amazing for the past 5 years. Never. So I I don't know that I think that's our norm. Normal is disruptive. And so you either embrace it or you fight it. And those that embrace it end up more successful on the other end.
I can, embracing it certainly allows for the chance to make the most of opportunities that might come your way. However, the challenge with some people, given what they're facing, is staying relevant as well as capitalizing on what's occurring currently. How do you help companies grapple with those challenges?
I mean, I think that's why companies should and do lean into firms like mine. So we are in organizations that are maybe a little bit more staid and people have been there for a long time and they've
Mhm.
decided corporate way. And we are experiencing things across a big portfolio of clients. So we're seeing things that work over here that might also work over there. Bringing us in to look at something allows us to give them a perspective they don't have within their ivory tower or their own walls.
Mhm.
And so I believe that's my job. And
Mhm.
the second that I'm fearful of change or fearful of technology or fearful of those things, I need to get out of this role because
Mhm.
it is literally my job to see it, embrace it, understand it, test it. Like we use Liger's brand as an experimental brand. We will try things for our brand before we try them for others just to see if they
Mhm.
work at all or find little test cases that we can use to be like, okay, so people were saying this is the thing. Let's go see if that's the thing now before we go and tell our clients to start doing it. So I feel like that's my role. I like that role, which is
Mhm.
things like happening with AI. I'm not afraid of it. I think it's great. Let's embrace it. It's not going away. It's the genie's out of the bottle. And what do we do with that disruption such that it makes things better? Because
Mhm.
we're not going back.
Yep.
We're not going back.
Uh, you mentioned the AI. If you could use that as a specific example, and maybe a client you work with, or perhaps still the Liger brand itself, uh, what are the sorts of things that you're experimenting with to try and find wins that you could implement more broadly?
Yeah, so is a great way to it's great for writing. So writing that have to be the most amazing. There's something that's
Mhm.
going to work or make sure SEO works, or you get your metadata or whatever. Also works as a really great starting point or maybe another opinion. So what I love about AI is I'm an insomniac. I'll
Mhm.
sleep a lot. So 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I write. I love to write typically in the middle of the night. It's like my best time. And so I'll write something and then I can use AI to help me think of a different word for something or whatever. So I'm not using it to write things. I'm using it to help me create and as an assistant or whatever. So
Mhm.
AI and generative AI and those types are creators, but not curators. So they create something, but we as human beings
Mhm.
always supposed to be being moved up to our highest order of work.
Mhm.
And so I can have it create, I can then curate. Oh no,
Yeah.
that's wrong. Let me change this, whatever. I liken this to chicken. S- There are two ways that you can end up with chicken in your house. You can go to a farm and you can find a chicken and you can kill the chicken and you can do all the things you need to do and
Mhm.
then cook it. Or you can go to the grocery store and you can buy chicken. And for some of the things that AI does for us, we were going to the farm picking up the chicken. We were like doing it the hard way. Now we literally you use AI. It's like going to the grocery store. Like, hey, I
Mhm.
need green, it looks like this, and then you turn it into what you need to turn it into. It's not can't shouldn't just bring home the chicken and eat it. That's going to be gross. Let's do
Mhm.
something. So some people see it as the cheat or whatever, and I'm like, so is it a cheat? Really? Would you walk in with a handwritten resume because that's cheating if I'm typing it up? We always do that. We vilify disruptive technologies because of what it could impact from a work perspective or whatever. But what we need to see them as is just part of the next wave of change that makes
Mhm.
us beings be able to concentrate on higher order, more.
So,
I think our next wave, I've been working with talking, I do some work on another side where we do some investment. There's so much happening right now that's very much the moving minority report, like all the screens around us and things
mhm.
like that is so next. That is so next. And it's moving our apps and our phones. What if we don't need a phone in 5 years? Wouldn't that be
Yeah.
crazy?
Yeah.
Right? So it's just another generation of the next thing.
I would imagine so. If you're working with brands that are global or at least international in nature, I'm assuming that there are unique challenges in maintaining brand authenticity as well as relevance across cultures. Is there a tweak that needs to be added on to Batcom? If so, could
Oh,
you talk
no,
us through?
StatCom is the same. That's the same.
Right, yeah.
What you're doing in the branding awareness or those pieces need to be
Mhm,
you know, sure that you're being cognizant of where and how and what you're doing on that side. And I'm a stronger believer in persona groups. Personas, if they're done properly, have different distributions within different areas and cultures. And so understanding that, but also layering on any of the other brand is really important. Voice and tone, words you're using, those kind of things. But you're still following backcom is back. That's your
mhm.
spine. You may need to have some stuff around that such that you're being conscious of where and how you may be distributing something.
So are you tapping into your client's expertise in that regard to ensure it resonates locally, or do you work with local partners
Yeah,
in specific geographic areas?
if our customers are smart enough, sometimes they're not. It is going to
Mhm,
typically be like feet on the street. But that's what I from my that's more of a research when I own the research company, understanding
mhm.
the people within markets that could really look at a thing, tell us, yeah, that's going to work or it's not, or we need to tweak it this way. So that's another place that I think brands could use the outside counsel of a firm in a really good and useful way.
So, and brand authenticity, are there specific ways that you would suggest and measure authenticity of a B2B brand?
That's funny. I think that's probably the hardest thing to measure. It's either
Yeah.
authentic or not, right? Like it's smelling the cell. That's why it's so important to do the brand therapy piece of it, because if you put together a brand that isn't authentic, then it's
Mhm,
immediately yeah. Like people know it doesn't getting that first part of who are you? How do you show up in the world? How do you want to show up in the world? What does it look like? Because you've seen companies try to steal somebody else's brand authenticity and you
mhm.
can right took that from that person. And your company's not like that at all. But really being honest with yourself about where your company is, where you want it to be, that you're going to do the things you want it to do to get there, and then making sure that percolates out. You're not leaning too heavily into one group or another.
I'm curious, as you interact and work with lots of these clients, do you find there's perhaps a couple of areas around branding that you find doesn't get much airtime? If so, what would they be?
Again, like the first 30 days that we work with a company, we're doing the brand part, that's the most
Mhm,
fun. Colors and we're doing things and
mhm,
whatever. But then companies forget about it, right? It's, oh, we chose these words and we chose this way we're going to show up. And it needs to be something you're going back to on a very regular basis. We would never say that word. We would present it this way. This isn't on brand. They're policing the brand beyond because I talk about the color white. There couldn't be a more generic, whatever. Old Navy, Target, will all use white. That's the primary color for them.
right.
And you can tell as a commercial starts or which brand it is
Mhm,
just by the way it's used, right? It's the same. They all start with these typically white screens, and you're like, oh, this is going to be an Apple commercial. You know it, and that's how important brand is. And a smaller brand needs to pay closer attention to their brand. Bigger brands are like very strict about how they're
mhm,
branded. And I'll find smaller brands aren't, and they can't afford not to be because they only have so many times they can be in front of a potential customer. They only have so much budget that being strict about how the brand shows up is more important to a smaller brand than it is to a larger brand because a larger brand can afford to make a mistake. Smaller brand cannot.
and a great point there. To wrap things up, Eric, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
My top takeaway to every single person all the time about marketing that I see the mistake that's made over and over again is lack of consistency.
Mhm,
Period. Consistency is what's going to make you win the race. So you decide what you're going to do and then you do it consistently. And if you're inconsistent, it's the 1% every day, right? Ends up
mhm.
365% at the end of the year. So consistency and understand that 1% doesn't feel like a lot, but it builds up and builds up. It is that compounding interest ideal, and you got to make that decision.
Great point. And if listeners are curious or want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend they head to?
My social media platform of choice is LinkedIn. If you want to find me and talk to me directly or see what I'm talking about or thinking about, I put out a weekly newsletter on there, LinkedIn. And then, of course, the website is ligerpartners.com,
Okay.
LIGER partners.com.
We'll include links in the show notes. Eric, this has been terrific. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for your time.